Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to mix things up a little bit. We have with us three owners of businesses that are using AI and have been using AI for the past 2+ years at this point. And the idea is to get a little more experience and understanding of what's working and what's not working within AI. Let's start off. Dave, give us a little background on kind of what the genesis was for your company, and start from there.
Great, thanks. And great to see everybody here. Great questions in the last panel. So I would say the security conversation was interesting. I'm probably running about 60% of my company with AI agents, and we kind of moved into it gradually. It wasn't the intent when we started the company. Mostly we were selling products to build and train AI systems. But when I started creating the agents to manage certain things like marketing and strategic planning, uh, customer relationships, and it started to work very, very well. And so we've kind of continued to cycle on that. And that's really been how we've been building out our continuing to build out our infrastructure. And I can talk about some of the techniques we've used, but that's been going for about 2 years. You know, you talked about my career a little bit. I decided to get back into the game and build another company. And it was really exciting to not only start to feed the industry and be part of the industry, but also to learn how these tools can really accelerate your business and collaborate with your human team to make it effective.
Excellent. Chris, how about you?
Yep. Well, my background was that I started a marketing company in 2001, and I also ran a podcast. And this was 2 years before ChatGPT. A gentleman jumped on my podcast, and he said, "I guess you didn't do your homework. I sold a marketing agency. I'm not here to talk about marketing. I talk about AI." And at the time, AI felt like the Terminator. And I just looked at my business partner. This guy started talking, and I was like, "If even 10% of what this guy says is true, um, our marketing company, we're screwed." And so what I did was he looked at me, he says, "Hey, you know what? I got two other business partners. We're going to run the marketing company. And I'm going to need you to kind of like figure out all this AI stuff." So I went back to school, got my certification from MIT. And from there, what I've been able to do is say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to do a launchpad from the market thing, start a new company to help companies basically tackle this new coming wave of AI." And so it broke into three different chapters. And this is where this is a long way of answering your question. Is the first thing is I see a lot of companies, they all want to get into AI. They buy it for their companies, $30 per user per head at minimum, but nobody knows how to use it. And so the first thing I needed to do is I needed to jump into AI training, but where it's used really well with capable people that know how to use the tools, know how to speak to the AI, how to understand how data works in it, and how to just protect it from misinformation. Then we started to evolve into governance, which you just heard a whole session on that. So we come in as a team and run all your governance, policies, procedures, and everything like that. And then finally, just like almost every AI company, we're getting into building custom agents. So like there's a level of AI that you can do at the foundational level, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to need to marry AI with custom programming and code to create things at the enterprise level that's not going to help just one individual, that's going to be able to help the entire enterprise.
Right. Interesting. Peter, how about your background?
Yeah, so my background started as an auditor, moved over to advisory services, working with Fortune 500 global companies, and started with big data back when that was a new thing in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. And one of the things that I saw was middle market companies needed the expertise, capabilities, and insights that these global companies, Fortune 500 companies, had. And so technology has caught up with the opportunity. The price points have come down. So we saw an opportunity to bring the data analytic capabilities was nothing with measurable ROI, uh, surfacing deep patterns within a company's transactional data, and then applying an AI LLM on top of it to help interpret the data so that it's essentially a combination of GPS, so large quantitative models with large language models that is analogous to GPS. The hardware is the geospatial satellites, the math to say I need to get from here to here, but then the voice telling you turn right 400 yards is the LLM aspect.
Interesting. So three totally different applications for AI. So buckle up. So Dave, give me a little bit more information on some of the challenges you faced as you were building out your agent infrastructure and whatnot, and how you translate that to working with your clients today.
Yeah, so initially one of the challenges we had, just like everybody here has experienced, you start using ChatGPT or some of the tools and then wander a lot. You know, you put in the prompt and it comes back. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and there's really no consistency in how it interacts with you yourself, but also how the rest of the team is using the content. So one of the things that we kind of locked into pretty early, and this kind of came from my experiences at Boeing and building larger systems across people, was how do you synchronize the business strategy, the business tactics, the people, and your systems and your deployment of AI. You have to synchronize all those things together, and that includes security, like we discussed here in the previous panel. So one of the things that we had to do is we made up a kind of a sprint technique, kind of built out of Agile. We call it a ruck, and so every 6 weeks we have a ruck. And as after that, we spend a week to kind of synchronize, and we spend a week preparing for the next cycle. And in that cycle, you get everything in alignment. And the other thing is, when you're inside of a cycle, you stop mucking around because everybody wants to play with the tools. Everybody wants to, tomorrow there's a new tool. Tomorrow there's a new tool. But in that 6 week cycle, you focus on execution. So you line the tools up and you focus on execution. I'm talking about 6 weeks, which is a pretty fast life cycle for any entity. But we needed to do that just because we felt things were moving so fast, but we still wanted to be synchronized. So that was probably one of the first big challenges we had to figure out, is how to get the human team, business tactics, the business execution goals, and the AI infrastructure all lined up and executing on the same platform. So we just actually locked in our latest one yesterday. And so now Monday we start the next ruck cycle, which is the next 6 weeks.
Excellent, thank you. Chris, over here.
So a lot of the challenges that we're trying to solve for our clients, we had to solve for ourselves first. And so we came up with this pyramid of value that we try to have. And the first thing we do deals with something called NLP, which means natural language processing. What that means is that there's nobody in my company whatsoever who types anymore. Very similar to how you would speak in your phone, you would do dictation. That is not using any AI, not any mainstream AI. But the technologies we use, you basically speak into your computer or your phone. It goes up, it cleans up the grammar and the punctuation in the cloud, and it comes down and it's about 99% perfect. And it's a learning model that it keeps getting better and it sounds more and more like you. But the first thing I need to do is I need to clean up communication acceleration. The next thing we need to do is we need to develop a personal pipeline. So what I do as a company is we come to your organization and we spend 2 days and train your company and your individuals at your location. It's like your top 50 individuals first. And in that process, we do something called a task manager. The task manager is a tool that we built, and it says, what are your daily tasks, your weekly tasks, your quarterly tasks, your semi-annual tasks, and your annual tasks? You put that into the AI, and then the AI says, these are all the redundancies that you do on a daily basis. And then what it does is it says, now that I have the task in the description, these are the agents that you can build so that you gain 1 week of your month back. So this is what you gain in the process. So I do that at the individual level and at the departmental level. And then finally, governance is we got to audit your leadership team, and we got to audit your IT. We got to basically figure out the policies and procedures. How do I know that? Because I had to do it for myself first. And then as we scale to other companies, we're able to do that. And then finally, continuing education. The stuff is evolving so incredibly quick. And it's not just one of these things where you can just wave a magic wand and say, oh, AI now. There's going to be some power users in your organization, but you need to lift everybody up. All right. So if I came to you and I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to be a power player for you, but by the way, I don't use the internet. I think you'd be like, Chris, I don't think it's going to work. Well, this is what's starting to happen in companies. This is not going to be an optional tool. You're going to start to see the power users that use it, and they're going to clearly separate from those who don't. So my job and my mission is to empower as many people as possible, to upskill them, to protect their jobs and their career, and to help the company grow. A lot of challenges there.
Yeah.
I had to solve them for myself first.
Getting everybody rolling in the same direction is not an easy task. We'll delve into that in a second. Peter, how about for you?
Yeah, we we're a little bit contrarian in how we look at it because one of the most, if not the most valuable assets of a company. And you can determine what that is by looking where the bad actors go, and it's towards data. And so companies are sitting on this treasure trove of data that they spend a lot of time, money, and attention protecting, but then don't mine it for the insights that are contained within that data. And so that's our approach is we use deterministic AI. It can't hallucinate. It can audit all the way back to the individual transaction. And from those hidden patterns that are surfaced, it identifies the divergence of data. Large language models are great at converging data and normalizing the outliers. And where the real value in our perspective comes from is the divergence, because the outliers are where the risks are and where the opportunities are. And so mine the data to understand where those are and then apply AI for the insight into what's the best tactic to approach it.
And I would, to
Go
echo
ahead.
what you said, that's incredibly rare what Peter's sort of doing. Meaning, like I'm speaking with businesses that are implementing AI, you know, every day in every way. And what I'm finding is the exact same things he said are not happening on a daily basis. And I think that companies like his that are separating, that are taking it differently, are going to be the big winners of the space.
So how do you, Peter, you mentioned something about not having hallucinations in there. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's so large quantitative models, LQMs or large data models, LDMs, are deterministic. It's math, right? It's statistics. It's finding deep learning. It's everything about the transaction or the data that you're looking for that can be traced back to a specific transaction or a specific instance. Then you can consolidate, you can run correlation. Large language models are a predictive model. And one of the best, I wish I'd come up with it, but one of the best descriptions of an LLM is it's a giant bag of words. It contains every written piece of language on the internet and books, anything and everything that the LLM has been trained on. And you take words, which is the prompt, put it into the bag, and the LLM starts to predict word by word what that next word will be. And that's where you get hallucinations because it's predictive. It's on a bell curve. And if you ask a question in the fat part of the bell curve, the probability that the answer or response is going to be accurate is high. If you go outside a standard deviation of 2 on either side of that diversion, that's where the hallucinations come in. And they're very confidently wrong. Right. And I think that's part of someone mentioned earlier that the outputs, it's very confident and it's going to work to convince you that it's right. And, I was taught as an auditor, if you don't know what an error looks like, you're never going to find it. And so if you're using an LLM and you don't know or have an expectation of what that output is going to be, and it's an error, you're never going to catch it.
Right. Yeah, I saw you nodding.
Yeah, well, Peter brought up a really important point, and it's that these systems are built upon the data that you're managing, and you can use discrete mathematical approaches like he was describing. You can use the stochastic approaches like the LMs, and you could combine the two to be very, very efficient. And that's really kind of where there's a lot of emergence right now between agent harnesses and agent memory, and a little bit of that brings things together. So there's places where you want to use essentially a mathematical program technique, and the AI tools can help you do that. And even in platforms like with Copilot and things that can help you do that. And then you have places where you use the language models to execute, which are actually doing exactly what I call text pachinko and kind of creating the language you need to execute. But the important thing is that you have to use the two together intelligently. It is systems design, and some of the platforms are doing this for you by bringing tools into your system. Some are doing it well, but it's something you have to pay attention to. I think one of the first things you have to do, from a systems perspective, is get your data clean, get your security infrastructure clean, get the frameworks in place so that you can use these tools on top of them efficiently. And that's different than the shadow AI cut and paste. I'm using something on the outside, in that approach. When you have the systems wired into your infrastructure, then they really start to operate at a much higher level.
Chris, you want to add to that?
I think I'm going to move on to the next question. These guys are pretty elite in this kind of data side.
No problem. So I want to back up a little bit and a little bit about as you're building your platforms, what were some of the things that went wrong in building out? Chris, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think one of the things that I wouldn't say it's what we did to build out our platforms. I can kind of give some of the lessons learned from just working with so many clients. One of the biggest challenges that we have is that we have a lot of companies that are implementing AI, but they're rolling out free accounts for everybody. And it's kind of the Wild West of who's putting what into their large language model. And it's a very scary premise. You know what I mean? And then on the other hand, what you have is the opposite side, where there's organizations that say, you know what, it's too dangerous. We're going to just let the dust settle. We're going to see where this AI thing goes. And what I'm finding is that the next, what I'm calling wave 2 or phase 2 of this is a very, what I call an agentic future. These are AI agents. I don't find that anyone is going to be able to just leapfrog phase 1 and just go into agents and just use this as a series of tools. There's a level of AI literacy that I believe that everyone should have. It's foundational, that you're going to need to know so that you don't just assume that some company's going to come in and build these smart tools. If you know how to speak the language and know how to basically, implement AI and then run it and have your staff know it, then you're going to be in charge to move into the next phase. If you just basically only have a couple of smart people using AI, building tools, and nobody's been through any of this training, it's like you're giving keys to a Ferrari to a 16-year-old. I'm not saying that you can't build super great tools, super great safeguards, but I would hope that they have a license.
Right. And making sure that everyone has that literacy and a standard set of definitions to draw upon is key. So in working with different business owners, what do you see as some of the challenges? Now you're trying to get everyone rowing the same direction. And that's like herding cats. So, Peter, how have you had the challenges have you faced in that space? How do you navigate it?
Yeah, it's a big challenge because I don't think we're all speaking the same language. And someone mentioned earlier that when they say ChatGPT, that's AI to everyone. And I'll give you a live example. We had a prospect that we were talking to. They ran analytics on their data. And one of the proof points that we pointed out was a customer that was getting far better pricing than they should, all things considered. And the CEO said, "Oh yeah, we know about that because the salesperson stated the procurement person of the customer. That's okay. That's not AI." And I said, "Really? That's interesting because AI to them was I asked a question, where am I losing money? That's AI." And the challenge is LLMs aren't structurally built and designed to answer financial information. They can, but again, it gets into is it accurate? It can't do the transaction, or it can't do the deep dive, the deep pattern recognition, and there's a language gap in what AI is, and how it can be applied, and the appropriate use cases for the various AI tools.
Right. Yeah.
I'm gonna be that guy who takes 2 answers for the same question. So I didn't get one last one, so I'm getting 2 this time.
Go right ahead.
One of the things that I'm also noticing is that because companies' first introduction to AI is a large language model, it is ChatGPT. They think that AI is just Google on steroids. But what they don't realize is I go to these companies and say, what's it like to onboard a new client? I'm a new employee. And they'll be like, well, it's hard. We got to train them. We got to do this stuff like that. And it's like, well, how many people do you hire a year? It's like, well, anyway, we hire anywhere between 20 to 30 people a year. I'm like, that seems like a big lift. It's like, yeah, we have an HR stuff, like HR company, HR team, and they do all this stuff. I'm like, what would it take if I said you're going to need to hire 1,000 people this year? And they're like, That's impossible. With our structure, we could never do that. It's like, well, these people that are building agents, we're not building one employee at a time. This company's, how many agents are 60% of your company?
60% about 17 agents right now.
And what do you think it'll be by the end of the year?
Oh, probably around 30.
So we're not talking about hiring one employee. We're not talking about Google on steroids. We're talking about looking at and saying, I'm going to put 1,000 people in each division of my company. That's the firepower of what's coming, guys. And what I'm finding is that when I speak at the leadership to leaders, they don't understand this coming wave, and they think the wave is just something that they can surf. I'm like, no, you are going to have to be prepared to paddle, big time.
Not seeing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I was at a conference a couple months ago. It's about 1,000 business leaders, and they're working on with Microsoft Copilot Studio agents. And there was I had a lot of conversations with their leadership on how they're deploying agents and AI inside their companies. And there was one company that I talked to, Hewitt actually, the construction company, and they had a really interesting, I think, a very viable approach. But they did a similar thing to what I was talking about: good policy, educating people on how they're actually deploying it in production. They've got government contracts, they've got a lot of commercial contracts, defense contracts. But the one thing that they were doing was they had separated out kind of a group of kind of leaders, AI innovators that wanted to do experimentation that kind of helped them build a sandbox where they could take their own tools, their own infrastructure, and they could experiment in that sandbox. And as they created a solution that was viable, they created a path to kind of move that solution into production, into the mainstream, and help educate everybody else. And if you would, in this innovation group, if you had sponsored your initiative, then you had the opportunity to bring it forward to the rest of the company and then support the deployment into the rest of the company. And I thought that was you don't really know how inside your company people are going to use these tools until you get into the problem scenarios that people are in day to day, and they'll have that inspiration that I can solve this problem, but you want them to do it in a IT approved, infrastructure deployed way. And so in this technique, using a sandbox supported experimentation environment as well with the kind of staged deployment was a way for them to do that. They found that to be pretty successful.
Fascinating. So looking at how you grow your client base and how you are you leveraging AI for things like marketing, things like that as well, or what? Talk a little bit about how do you acquire new customers?
So we've looked at doing appointment centers that leverage AI. There's AI marketing available on LinkedIn. There are various tools. But what we're doing, we use Claude primarily. We've engaged a third party to build us an inbound appointment center, or an outbound appointment setting that we know what our ICP is, and they're automating, I forget how many agents they're building, that essentially multiplies, to Chris's point, we could have 1,000 people selling for us. Right, and running through the qualification and the like, and then at the appropriate time, hand it over to the person.
Yeah. Chris, what for you?
I mean, I've run a marketing company for the last 25 years, so that didn't.
It's unfair, but
Yeah. Yeah. As I said, this was a threat to my business, my marketing business. And so I went back and I got my certification. The certification organization through MIT gave me access to this association. And I spoke with them, and I did really well. And they came after me. It's like, I don't know you know this or not, but we need 300 and that's a year. So like I've been, ever since this wave, like 2.5 years ago, I've been doing this talks like this 10 times a month. And this has turned into, just from a thought leadership standpoint, and just saying what I'm seeing out there, what is real, where AI is at, where it's going, how to be prepared, has opened the doors. Like my company, my AI company of 2 years is going to dwarf my marketing company of 25 by the end of the year. It's
and
all
you're built to
because
scale, so
I'm riding this wave. I think I've said wave 10 times, probably in 5 different directions, but I'm sort of riding this wave kind of effectively. And I don't have to sell really. I just have to explain what's going on in the market.
you're in the right place at the right time all the time.
Yeah, very fortunate.
Good problem to have. How about for you, David?
Yeah, our core business is we help people monetize data for AI training. So companies publish data that they want to use for training. We create what we call deep expert agents. So agents that actually are trained on your corporate expertise or industry expertise or both. And we're a Databricks marketplace. So Databricks is probably probably the largest kind of data analytics platform out there. And ironically, it's Databricks. So their Databricks marketplace has a lot of intelligence built into it. So we can see every data set, how many people look at it, exactly who looks at it, who downloads it, and who potentially can procure it. And so we've built a lot of infrastructure around that. So we do a lot of analysis on which ones are the most popular. We double down on creating more content in those areas. And then we also do all the automated follow-up and engagement of people who actually looked at a data set, downloaded a data set. So I'd say explicitly that's probably the most mechanized, other than development, writing code, AI infrastructure that we have.
Interesting. So, from a, what was one of the first, as you were building out your organization, what was one of the first big wins that you had with in your case, for the agentic AI? You said you had like 17 agents or so. So then obviously I'll follow the other two.
Well, it's interesting because
What do you call a win? What would you call a win?
Well, I would call a win. So we had a product launch in partnership with Databricks. When we announced our Databricks partnership, and we launched a collection of our data sets, and through a combination, I think, of our PR and outreach activities as well as the infrastructure. And this was 100% agentic. So I was the only person steering this ship, and my dev guys would keep the site live and making sure that everything was good there. But we went through that whole life cycle, and we ended up we're in the top 10 on half the categories essentially on Databricks out of that initial visibility within the deep inside of the Databricks ecosystem. And so that was almost completely orchestrated by the agents. And you talk about agents being a threat to marketing. That's case in point. I mean, it was, and I've had marketing teams before, I've run marketing teams before, sales teams, et cetera. And, there are, I would say it was on par with some of the good teams I've had. And that was, and I'm self-funded. Fortunately, I'm able to do that. And I have a little bit of flexibility to execute in this domain. But that is something that was really transcendent to me. I mean, development makes sense, data analysis makes sense, but to do something that previously I'd done with a human team of 6 or 7 people was a big transition.
That's pretty cool. Chris.
Yeah, I think one of the successes that we started to hear is just this pattern of what we would hear back from our clients. So we would do this task manager analysis of the redundancies you do, and people would raise their hand and they would say, so I did my analysis and it said I should create this agent, and I ran the agent and it works. I tried it again and it works. I tried it again and it works. And I was like, good. Well, like, how much time were you doing before AI? And I was like, okay, like 4 hours. It's like, okay, 4 hours a month. It's like 4 hours a day. I was like, well, how long are you doing it now? It's like, with the tools, like, I don't know, 20 minutes. I'm like, so I just started like looking at him and I started multiplying, per day, per week, per month, per year. But then I was just like, if I can put that energy, like that lightning in a bottle, and start to help companies do that, I think that it's going to dramatically improve their performance. But one of the things that I also just noticed as well is that once you've trained somebody, they get that aha moment. It's just like, I talk to people that just fuddle around with AI and they're like, I don't sort of want to stop. Like, I had someone I was talking to here, he's like, I used AI to build my whiskey collection. And he goes, I thought it would take an hour. And he goes, I spent the whole
application.
I know.
That's a good application.
He's like, I spent the whole weekend on it. And then only comes one is just the curiosity to continue. And so that's why we graded wins, is that aha moment where you're like, if this tool can do this, I wonder if it can do that, it can do that, and it can do that.
Natural extension,
That
expansion.
natural curiosity.
Right.
Yeah.
Peter, how about for you?
Yeah, so with my background in advisory, the model was 100,000 a month for an engagement. So if it was 3 months, it would be a $300,000 engagement. And our very first engagement as Clear Insights AI, it was a $57 million distributor.
It was what?
$57 million distributor. And they had 2,000 customers, 2,400 SKUs, something like that. Very thin margins. Their EBITDA was 850,000, and the CEO owner took a flyer and said, "Yeah, if you can find some profit in our business, that would be great." What would have taken 3, 6, 9 months of data analytics, spreadsheets, pivot tables, etc., in runtime on the virtual computer was less than an hour. They turned from 850,000 EBITDA to 4.2 million in EBITDA in a single year because of the margin intelligence that they understood their customers, their customer behavior, the SKU behavior, where the pricing anomalies were, and that gets back to the looking for the divergence within the data that are the risks and that are the opportunities, and then having an action plan to address both. And it does produce, our objective is at least a 10x cash on cash return on the investment in the platform
Wow. Do you get an invite to the Christmas party every year too?
every year.
That's what you call ROI.
So I get ROA is a great kind of segue. How do you position yourself with your clients to talk about ROI or providing ROI from a quantitative perspective, Chris?
Yeah. Well, like I was telling you before, there's about 5 pillars that we're looking for: speeding up communication, developing pipelines to save time, proper governance so that you know that you're not going to just the risk reward of AI, that it's heavily favored on reward, and then making sure that they have continuing education on this. But so this sounds weird because I'm a marketer, so I always tell stories. And so there's this movie called Limitless. And in Limitless, the guy takes a pill and he's just super smart. But then the next day, it wears off and he goes to the drug dealer and it's like, dude, you got to give me more of this stuff. And the drug dealer goes, it works better if you're smart already. All right. Now I know this sounds weird, but AI is going to level set people that are just average Joe Blow employees. It's going to upskill them. But if you can empower somebody smart already that has authentic intelligence, that knows his craft, been in that chair and stuff like that, it's gasoline on a fire. So when I say ROI, usually the boss comes to me and he's like, dude, Bob took your class? You should see what Bob did. I'm not going to build that tool. I'm going to teach Bob to get fired up, no pun intended, to go and build that tool.
Yeah, that's a good point. We were talking my early days when I got involved in AI and we were building expert systems at Boeing. And the reason we were building them was because all the engineers were leaving and they were taking all of their domain knowledge, their tacit knowledge, building aircraft for 4 years with them. And we were trying to capture that, encapsulate that into the systems. And that's kind of what we built in this current implementation with our deep expert agents, because it's when you can take the expertise and capabilities of a smart AI system, but you can actually load it, train it on the data that you have, similar to what Peter's talking about, his solutions, then you really get to a next level capability and to collaborate with your employees, for people to have the kind of continuation. You bring a new employee on, it's that much easier to train them up. That's that much easier for them to synchronize with the rest of the business and proceed. And so, from a justification ROI numbers perspective, I don't have an example like Peter does yet, unfortunately. But that's kind of what we see is how can you bring your data, your knowledge of your company into the expertise of the best foundation models, the best models out there, and operate it in a consistent manner, in a safe, of course, secure manner, reflecting on the previous panel.
Exactly. And I guess along those lines, you talked about having everybody working together. There's a challenge in working with organizations and the dysfunctionality that can happen in a lot of organizations. How do you navigate that minefield and getting everybody rowing the same direction so that an AI project can be successful? Now you're into psychology. Peter, want to start with you?
We're so we don't change technology, we don't change process, we don't change people. What we do is we give them the insights they need to take the next best action. So instead of them coming in, this is a great example, a CRO, it's an off-label use of it. But a CRO, one of our clients, looks at it as this is how I'm going to plan my week because it identifies the opportunities that are timely, that are urgent, the risks, actions that need to be taken, and so the CRO can now direct his SDRs, his sales reps to go and take very specific actions. So it's activities they would be doing anyway. It's just now the right activity at the right time.
Shiny different lens.
So
Yeah.
it's the uptake, the adoption, the execution risk is much lower
Right.
than a typical implementation or AI initiative.
Gotcha. Dave, how about for you?
Well, I think, the human loop where they actually have the human to system collaboration is a very, very important thing. That's not going to stop. In fact, I think it's one of the things that you're going to see a lot more news about in the next year or two is how people work with the tools. And then Chris mentioned how his team uses voice to think natural language to control a lot of systems. And I think that's that combined with capabilities. You think about a classic case is running a sales team and deploying a CRM system. Everybody here's done it. You deploy a CRM system. It's like, okay, I want my top sales guy, spending 2 hours a day sitting at his desk, typing in every field in my CRM system so I can actually process the data. And that usually doesn't go well. They don't like doing that. They don't want anything to do with that. They're on the phone. They'd rather be on the phone for another 2 hours with prospects than mucking around with that. And in the case of where we're going is they can do that now. They can basically just leave a message somewhere and say, update this client. Here's all the details. Here's the follow-up items, and it'll take care of the rest. And we need to do, we being those who are managing the companies and deploying the solutions, need to pay attention to that and do a better job of making these systems support our team members the way they like to work. And I think that's real. We saw this going when we deployed these systems. One of the biggest uplifts we saw in the deployment was the workstation, the environment that the engineers would use in building solutions. One of the biggest benefits was this integrated environment. And I think it's something too, when you look at the tools like Copilot and I'm just using Microsoft as an example, but the way all the tools work together kind of natively, do it in ways that your employees like to use the tools. And that will actually, I think, make the whole platform be much more performant.
Chris?
I think one of the things that we're also trying to do is we're trying to figure out what your goal is. Because I feel like I've overcooked the idea that what we're going to do is just save you a bunch of time. What I've found with AI is sometimes you have this time trade that I put as much time as I did into AI as I did without AI. But almost every time I do that, my quality standards go up significantly. So if there's a misnomer when I first start that they're like, it's going to save us so much time. And in the back of the mind, like, these are people I can let go. Like, well, what if I can raise your quality standards? What if I can do the job that you're doing, with the same amount you're doing, but just do it 5 times stronger, bigger, stronger, faster, right? So that's getting alignment on what your actual goal is. But then also just how you were talking about these sandbox environments that I want to train your employees across the board. But when I start to do these agentic experiments, what I want to be able to do is I want to do this in a sandbox that's going to prove results. What I also don't want to do is awaken the beast entire company. So I work a lot in construction. And so what I don't want to do is there's this thing that's called RFIs. It means request for information. I don't want to wake up one day and 10 people all build the same RFI tool. So I build it in a sandbox and I show the power of it and the data of it. But then I also encourage the departments to say, look at the firepower here. You need to get your ideas formulated at the division by division level. And then I gamify it. I turn it into something that looks like a March Madness pool where all your ideas go in and people upvote them until we figure out which agents to build, for the company. And I think one of the things that I'm just trying to do to get everybody rowing in the right direction, be clear alignment on their goals. 2, show a proof of concept that's going to work. And then 3, empower them to have their own ideas. Because if I say, oh, well, if that department did this, I bet if our department can do this, this, and this. What I find is that people say, I want AI. And if I ask them, what is AI? I'm like, I don't know, but I want it.
Right.
You got to see it. I'm telling you, you got to see it. And until you show it, it's all theoretical.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much.